Oh, I had a bit of trouble logging on then. Well, I want to say a big good evening going out to you, wherever you might be around the world.
Already did my time.
It's another edition of Issues Today on World Jam Global Radio. And tonight, alongside me, your host, Kervin, Julien, and your co-host, Dr. David Remay.
Already did my time.
We have with us, once again, Carol Becker, but also renowned author, Ramzy Baroud.
I didn't really care about the system.
Ramzy Baroud.
It was do or die.
I hope I pronounced that right.
Rivals. I was too young and foolish to
Well, I'm really looking forward to this show.
lessons in the streets. There was not a man I couldn't beat. I was good with my hands and very quick on my feet. I was swimming in women. I had girls all over the street. I was getting money. Life was so sweet. Now things have changed. The whole game has been rearranged. I'm a changed man. Don't need no gun in my hand. It ain't about being no gangster. Life is too short to spend it all in jail. Trying to cope with this living hell. Already did my time.
It's really been a mixed up week this week, but I'm quite sure Dr. David Remay is going to set us straight.
Paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. I was a drug dealer, sold more drugs than Superfly, but I never got high on my own supply. I'm not proud of what I had to do. That's why I'm telling my story to you and you. I had to repent. I must admit, I was doing all kind of stupid shit. Now sit back and think it over since I've gotten older. The life I used to live, I wouldn't do it again. I was young and dumb, my brain was so numb. I was a real Forrest Gump, but I was nobody's chump. Me and Billy the Kid.
Okay,
I was the real Terminator.
now that I've finished playing around with buttons and passwords,
Up and spit you out like
we are live on World Jam Global Radio, going out to you across the globe
The opening statements are going on right now. He could be facing life.
with a show that's about to blow your mind. Once again, our guests are Carol Becker, Ramzy Baroud,
did my time, paid for my crime. Already
and with this cold quickly bunging me up, I'm going to hand you over to my co-host and my dear friend, Dr. David Remay.
Hello, Kervin.
Hello, David. How are you, sir?
Well, I'm fine. As I told you earlier, we are in Connecticut today. The ocean is turquoise, the sky is sapphire, and the world is falling apart. But that's to be expected in the era of Donald Trump. I'm very happy to have our wonderful guest with us today, Ramzy Baroud and Carol Becker, a longtime friend and follower. I remind everybody that we are on fire in terms of bringing justice to the world. And if we're not bringing justice, we're bringing it to the forefront. I want to especially say this to you, Kervin. I hope your cold gets a lot better, and I'm glad you're a long, long way away from me. Now, drink some hot tea. I'm sure tea is very common in England. I know you and Beth and Philip have had tea frequently. So have some Earl Grey tea, lay back, and enjoy the show. Or as a Texas politician once said, lay back and enjoy your getting raped. And that's what he thought of women. And of course, he lost the election, but that was in the day when Texas cared about women and humanity. What's going on in America? Donald Trump. I tell you the truth. They're going to rename it. They're going to call him Hurricane Trump or Tornado Trump because he spins around in furies and in circles like a great cyclone, destroying all that comes before him. With 140 characters, the mentally unstable person who has the mind of a child, unstable by an unhealthy life and in a body of an old fat creep who lies about it, is a disaster for the United States of America. I want to say something in particular. We have discussed so many times on this show about gun violence, and that violence is primarily the result of police killing young people who don't even have guns. But now we have a new situation in America, a situation in which, unbelievably, the Senate and Congress of the United States of America have passed a law that Trump has promised to sign that will give 75,000 mentally unstable people receiving Social Security disability the right to own a gun without a background check. Now get this straight. 75,000 people on mental disability from the Social Security are going to own guns. Now, what is the irony of that? The irony is that the gun lobby, NRA, tells us, don't focus on the gun. The gun doesn't kill people. People kill people. Focus on the people. So now we focus on the people, strip 75,000 people who have mental disability and are receiving money from Social Security because they're not even capable of working. We focus on them, and now the gun lobby says, oh, you're discriminating against people. This is the way they work. Republicans stalled every initiative, every good person President Obama nominated to serve our government. Finally, because we could not get around them, and because we could not get around the Senate filibuster, we reduced the filibuster to allow a majority vote for cabinet members and judges, except for the Supreme Court. Now, we're able to get them passed. In the new government, the Republicans remind us every day that they can put tyrants, dictators, religious zealots, homophobes, Arab haters, and absolute radicals who have no qualifications to be in the cabinet of the United States of America with a majority vote, and they blame it on Democrats because we had to pass a law to get around their obstruction of an African-American president whom they never accepted as president of the United States of America. And now they say, because we did what we had to do to establish a government, that we are responsible if the current Senate uses the nuclear option, as they call it, to put on the homophobic, religious fanatic, anti-women, pro-life, fanatic Republican Gorsuch to the Supreme Court of the United States. This is the way they work. The same with the mental illness of guns, and the same with this. Well, let me ask the Republicans one thing. If somebody goes and murders somebody, does that give you a precedent to murder as well? Not at all. In our system, if you murder somebody, you get punished. And if the person you murdered has a family member who then goes and murders a family member of yours, that person will be prosecuted for murder. That is called, my friends, civilization. Civilization. And that is a word not in the vocabulary of the Republican primates who are truly reptilian in nature governing our country. And just as the greatest reptiles in the history of the world were exterminated by a meteor, I cannot wait until a meteor of political proportions equivalent to null's grund zero blows these peoples out of the water. Now, let me tell you something else is ridiculous. Last week, I have a young student who is Jewish. Everybody knows I'm a Jew. Okay, so this guy goes to my synagogue. I help him with Hebrew. I helped him with his bar mitzvah. I paid a certain amount of money, and others did, for him to go to a $300 deal for Jewish advanced studies for high school students. He's 14. So he goes to our state capital, supposedly learn more about Judaism, and it turns into a situation where a bunch of Israelis are there pushing their propaganda of how great Israel is, the most moral army in the world, how they suffer, how Palestinians are terrorists. And then they show on the internet supposed anti-Semites. Well, you know, Hasbara worked for Donald Trump, and Hasbara taught the Russians. And they all worked together to create this, what I call Israel-Russia troll syndrome on the internet. And so if you write anything, one of these people will come in, he's got 50 followers. Who cares? I have nearly 20,000. So I, of course, block them. I don't waste my time on them. Well, my friends, Kervin, put on your seatbelt. Ramsey, put on your double seatbelt. And Carol, get a firm cushion. They had, unbeknownst, these young kids, and they put up some supposed anti-Semites So one of the internet Twitters they put up said, and it was in reference to what Ramsey wrote about the Paris peace meeting of 72 nations that basically ended all pretense of Israel wanting peace. And I published this long before. I did this in December, so long before he wrote his. So I'm not plagiarizing Ramsey in any way, but it's evidence that great minds do work together, if I may say so. So I put up on the Twitter, Paris Peace Conference, absent Netanyahu, proves Israel does not want peace, but instead total victory over Palestinians. All right. And I had my picture, Dr. David Romay. And they flashed this in Hartford to a number of people who know me and to this student and his colleague who I paid to go. And guess what? They flashed it to them. And Jared and the others said, well, that's Dr. Romay. He belongs to our congregation. He's a Jew. And he brought it back to me and he showed this to me. He said, David, look what they had of this. I said, what did they say about it, Jared? He said, well, they were showing about anti-Semitism. I said, well, Jared, let's go through this. Is there the word Jew ever mentioned? He said, no. I said, what is anti-Semitism? He said, well, it's the irrational hatred of Jews. I said, fine. Did it say the word Jew? No. I said, did it say the word Israel? Yes. What is Israel? A state, okay. What is Palestine? A people, and wanting to be a state. I said, very good. And what is the Paris Peace Conference? He said, well, it was an attempt to get peace. And I said, who didn't show up? Netanyahu. I said, what is anti-Semitism about this? He said, nothing. I said, so what did you think when you saw it? He said, I thought it was wrong. I said, what did you say? He said, I didn't say a word. I said, smart boy, don't ever show them your hand. Don't show them your hand. But this is what's happening in America. They get these Israelis here under the pretense of talking about Judaism. And then they try to brainwash our children, contrary to the express promise of Chaim Weizmann and David Ben-Gurion to Justice Brandeis when they set up this Zionism in America. And they recruit our young boys, and they take them to Israel and our women, and they put them in that army, the Goliath Brigade or whatever they call them, and they die. They die fighting for a cause of Zionism, not Judaism. Now, if a Palestinian or if an Arab nation recruited an American of their nationality to do
Hello, David. Can the rest of you hear me? Hello? Can you guys hear me? Have I lost you all? Right, okay. We're going to have to do this thing again, I think. Oh, okay, there it went. There it went. Let's go do it again.
I don't think Kervin hear us, but I'm not sure if... Are you there, Kervin?
Yeah, I'm back.
Kervin, were we on the air while you were off?
No. I was on the air, but you was off.
How long was I off?
About 20 seconds.
Well, that's 20 seconds of gold lost. Anyway, let me wrap up by saying this. I'm going to cut it short today because I want to hear Ramsey talk. And I want to hear Ramsey forget about Trump's buffoon invading Mexico and Australia. That's all distraction. I want to hear Ramsey and Carol. I want to hear them talk about some amazing things he has brought up. Basically, Ramsey thinks that Trump will clarify the fact that the peace process was a fake from the beginning and it's over. And Trump's directness will verify that. Second, Ramsey does something amazing, and I think our guests should listen to this. He basically says the two-state solution is over. It was never really attempted. It was a fraud on the people of the world conducted by American power and Israeli sleight of hand. And ultimately we're going to have a one state. But that one state will be, of course, majority Palestinian. And he challenges Israel basically to say, can you live with other people in a democratic one state? Can you do this? And if you can't, is the problem not yours? And I think this is the clarity that Ramsey brings to this cause. And I want to ask him two important questions to address during this show. One, what is the likelihood and time factor that it would be a one state, knowing that one state under Israel would be apartheid and unacceptable to the next president of the United States and to the UN and to the Olympics and to all the other organizations that found it reprehensible in South Africa and will do so here? And secondly, I want Ramsey to address an issue very important and of which I have been warning about for weeks now, and that is a potential war between Israel and Iran. I want to know what he thinks of the liabilities of that war and the potentiality of that war, and what would result in a war of 8 million Israelis with 5 million included the Palestinian area, 5 million, what you call fifth column, anti-Israelis within Israel's own border. How could Israel fight a war with 5 million people opposed to that war within their own borders while he fights the Iranians? What will Russia do? What will Europe do? What will America do? If America couldn't defeat Iraq, that only had 20 million people, how would it fight Iran with 100 million people and tens of thousands of Americans within their grasp in Afghanistan, Iraq, and elsewhere? So let us go on with the show. Ramsey, welcome aboard. Carol, welcome aboard. First of all, Ramsey, introduce yourself, then Carol, introduce yourself, and then Kervin and I'll get to the meat.
Well, here's the thing. First and foremost, Ramsey, I want you to take notes and write down on a piece of paper, because David is not going to trump me. Did you like the way I just threw that one in there? Carol, let's introduce you first and tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, what you're about, and then we'll go over to Ramsey straight after.
Very good.
Okay. I'm 73 years old. I've been retired. I've been retired for almost 9 years from the university. I became a Palestinian social media activist because I opened a Twitter account in June of 2014. And so, of course, I saw all the videos that were coming in about Operation Protective Edge, and I was absolutely horrified. My moral compass, the point that says evil, pointed to Israel. I never had any doubt of that. And that is what got me loving Palestine and becoming a social media activist for Palestine. I have a lot of Palestinian friends, and I love each one of them. But that's my story. I'm sticking to it.
Well, Carol, once again, it's absolutely fantastic to have you on the show, and I'm so glad that you could join us again on this very, very important issue. And on this update on Palestinian issues that we've been looking forward to. Let's just introduce Ramsey first before we start getting to the meat of the thing. Let's hear from Ramsey, and he can tell us a little bit about himself and tell the audience a little bit about himself.
Sure, Kervin. But before I do so, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for not just for the opportunity to speak to you, but also for all the work that you have been doing, all the energy that you bring to this cause, and trying to unify people around the just cause of Palestine, and also in such a way that is really driven by common sense, as opposed to the nonsensical hasbara that we hear from the Israelis all the time. So it's very good to know that we have friends and comrades of your caliber on our side and pushing the right agenda for the right reasons. I'm Ramsey Baroud. I hold a PhD from the University of Exeter. My supervisor is Julien, and I'm an author of several books. My main focus really is history, but history not as a reminder of the past, as opposed to history as an active participant in shaping the present. my specialty, academic specialty, is rather people's history, using narrative and narrative theory to bring to challenge the elitist version of history that we hear about Palestine and Israel. Because Palestine is not about Yasser Arafat and Mahmoud Abbas. Palestine is about the people who have resisted for generation after generation for 70 years, and they continue to challenge Israel's fourth strongest army in the world and so on. It is their determination, their will, their resistance that made our cause still alive and still possible to achieve the freedom that we have coveted for so long. So that's really my academic focus. Most of my writing, I'm a weekly columnist to many print and online newspapers for the last 20 years. I try, as David said earlier, I try to be as cynical as I can in challenging really the norm and the mainstream classical way of seeing the situation in Palestine and Israel. I point at things that may appear to be common sense to you, but sadly it's not common sense to a whole lot of people who have seen the story and understand the so-called conflict from almost purely Israeli point of view. Sometimes I feel like we are pushing against a mountain, but in recent years, a lot of changes have been happening, especially within the BDS movement. We are able to actually register enough resistance that Israel is really quite worried, if not even terrified, of the potential of having the kind of popular push that we can actually finally defeat apartheid in that country.
Ramzi, are you Palestinian, or where are you from?
I'm a Palestinian, born and raised in a refugee camp in the Gaza Strip. I'm a U.S. citizen as well, so I divided my life basically 22 years spent in Palestine in refugee camps and 22 years in the United States.
Oh, you're almost giving away your age then, so you're telling me you're 44.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. And in your 22 years of being in America, being away from Palestine, what has troubled you the most?
Well, of course, there is that initial shock that you kind of get of the almost complete lack of understanding of what is happening in Palestine, the complete and utter dehumanization of the Palestinian. The fact that you have a whole nation that thrives and processes its foreign policy and base its politics on almost an entirely fraudulent understanding of history, to actually spend years and years trying to just register within the American collective psyche that Palestinians are human beings and that they actually exist, and there is such a thing as a Palestinian people. And then you hear the likes of Newt Gingrich and his friends, and keep repeating that there is no such thing as Palestinians. It's really quite disheartening, to say the least. And so we are not really fighting an equal war here. The same way that Gaza and the rest of the Palestinian resistance in Palestine is not fighting an equal war against a nuclear armed country like Israel. I don't think intellectually we are also fighting an equal war. We are starting a war in which we are not really delving into the politics and the common sense of the situation, as opposed to actually try to assert yourself and your identity as a human being, so that people would actually look at you and consider your needs and your plight as that of any other human being. I feel like this has been and continues to be a major fight for us in this country. It's different than Europe, to say the least. I've lived in Europe for several years, in London in particular, and the debate there is far more advanced than it is here in the United States. Just to give you a very quick example, most of Senate hearings in the United States, if not all of them, if they are ever concerning Palestine and Israel, and they would need expert witnesses to speak on the issue, it's usually Israelis who speak as witness experts on behalf of Palestinians. I mean, you don't actually see Palestinians speaking on behalf of Palestinians almost in any given official scenario. Extremely sad situation. And I must register also my protest that quite often, that even within the Palestine circle, the Palestine Solidarity Movement, I feel that we have reached a point that Palestinians are so dehumanized within our own intellectual circles that the Palestinian voice is muted. That you could have a pro-Palestine solidarity conference in a major American city without seeing many Palestinians actually speaking there, but a lot of people speaking on behalf of Palestinians. I hope that this situation is changing, but we need to do so, because if the Palestinian is absent from the Palestinian discourse, then I feel like it's a waste of time. We are really not talking about anything of value.
Let me jump in here. First of all, I understand. I believe I understand, because 43 members of the Hungarian Jewish family and my own family were dehumanized and delegitimized, put on a transport from Hungary in the summer of 44 and sent to a concentration camp and were turned into ashes within 24 hours. Now, I know what it is, because the Germans called us rats and rodents and termites. And every time you said a Jew, it was an invader. And that is exactly what has happened to Palestinians, except they're turned into ashes from bombs instead of ovens. And in Gaza in particular, Gaza is today the largest ghetto in the world. It is as bad as the Warsaw Ghetto in many ways. And it's being effected by Israelis who should know better, but to dehumanize and to delegitimize people. The minute you say the word Palestinian, the first thought in your mind is terrorist. The minute you say the word Mexican is an illegal immigrant. The minute you say the word Japanese, you think Jap. And this is the American way. And the Israeli lobbyists in America have, beyond doubt, so delegitimized your people, the Palestinians, that, as you said, Ramsey, when you go to a conference, when you're on television, when you have Palestinian representatives, the first thing they do is say, we are Palestinians, we are people too. Think of that for a moment. We are people too. When a human being has been so delegitimized, so dehumanized by an entire nation and its chief ally, as to have to open a statement by saying, we are people too. That is where the debate must begin. What has happened to cause people to be so defensive, so humiliated, so downtrodden, that they have to cry forth like a slave in America, we are people too? That is where it begins. So I understand that.
Yeah, coming in, Carol.
I'd like to make a note, if that's okay. I can understand Dr. Baroud's shock when he came to the United States and realized that Palestine was not even in the forefront of anybody's thought. But, our Congress has been bought and sold to AIPAC through mega donors that insist on Israel first. So our Congress is out. They're not going to be any help. And the other problems are media, mainstream media. They are also Zionist controlled, and they're not going to be any help. So social media has at least opened a route to influence some people. I think that some people are being influenced. You have to keep fighting and getting this information out there on social media, hoping that this is true.
The funny thing is, as you kind of watch Donald Trump systematically put people in position, and for me, as a looking at it as an outsider, I'm not in America. I'm not an American. American politics doesn't naturally affect me as anyway. But I'm sitting down here on the sidelines and I'm watching this, and for every body that he puts in a position, I think to myself, but they don't fit. How on earth could anybody get away with putting them around him, almost a defense of yes men that will do as he says, and what hope does that give you for what may happen in Palestine for the next 4 years?
Is that question for me, Kervin?
Yeah. Let's throw that one for you, Ramzi.
Yes, actually, I wrote an article that sadly people kind of read the title and they kind of misjudged what the content was. And I tried to be slightly clever about it by arguing that Donald Trump might actually be good for the Palestinians. Mm-hmm. But of course, my argument goes this way. For many, many years, and just to kind of give some sort of a timeline, let's say from the era of Henry Kissinger, okay. Mid-late 70s throughout the Madrid talks in 91, peace process 93, and so forth all the way until today. There's been this kind of like really this major deception that's going on, this massive charade in which the Americans have created this illusion, a mirage really, that there is such a thing as a peace process, and we are trying to process a great deal of differences between both sides in an equal conflict in order for us to achieve peace at the very end. And we hold both sides accountable when they fail to do so. And sometimes we are slightly harsh on Israel, but we continue to give them billions of dollars for some reason to build the very settlements that we publicly protest. Very odd American charade. They played it so very well. I feel like you can learn a great deal about branding and marketing from that charade. And they are very, very good at it, to the point that vast majority of people just really kind of like, especially after that famous or infamous handshake between Yasser Arafat and Rabin in the White House, on the White House lawn in 1993, where people would say, but why are you still unhappy? I mean, okay, you have a flag, you have peace, why are Palestinians still fighting? And you try to explain to them that there is a difference between reality and between whatever is happening in whatever the American media is saying, whatever American politicians are saying, to the point that the likes of Netanyahu, when they come out on television and say, listen, we are sick and tired of this, this nonsense about, international conferences for peace. Let's talk to our Palestinian friends. Come on, talk to us directly. What's the problem? And a lot of people are really having a lot of hard time understanding why Palestinians are not engaged in this peace process. Now,
Ramzi, let me interrupt a second.
Yes.
I love what you're saying. And I read this article very carefully. Paris Peace Conference signaling an end to Western. I love this. Now, but you make a point yourself and you answer your own question, even though you don't like it. And I don't like it, but it's the way it is. You said Obama must have, at one point, realized that the efforts were futile. For a start, Netanyahu seemed to have a greater influence with the U.S. Congress than the president himself. And then you explain how he went, okay, that's absolutely true. Now, secondly, you say this. Kerry's nostalgic last speech proved that it was a failure, it was all over, it was always going to be. It says here, both Kerry and Obama have no one to blame but themselves. Their administration had the political clout and the popular mandate to push Israel. But you see, that contradicts what you said. It was futile from the beginning because Netanyahu had the power over Congress. And a president can only do what Congress permits in the end. And as Carol Becker pointed out, Congress is completely owned by the Israeli lobby for a number of reasons. And so it was futile from the beginning, and Obama and Kerry did not have it. And Obama's mistake was that he didn't tell the American people, I can make no move for Israeli peace because Israel doesn't want peace. And until Israel wants peace, and therefore I am withholding all weaponry from Palestine and all financial resources from Israel. Now that would have made a mark.
That's right, David. But what I'm saying here
wait, I want you to address one more question beside that. Why is it, and you pointed out in an article you wrote here, beautifully said, historically, Palestinians had to renounce violence before the U.S. or UN would speak to them. Why did Israel not have to renounce violence?
Yes.
Why?
Yes.
Why?
Yeah.
Why? What's your judgment on that?
Yes, but just to address the issue of the futility of the peace process.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
I think it's futile in the sense that it was never really intended to yield the publicly announced results in the first place. I don't think it was a process really to achieve peace. It was a process as an end in itself. It was an American investment by saying, listen, this as Barack Obama refers to it as the rule books, or the rule book. This is how the game is played. And it's American leadership in the Middle East that is going to matter. And it's either you join us or you don't. If you join us, you are a moderate, you are an ally, we love you. And we would support your policies, no matter how terrible it is in Egypt, in Saudi Arabia, and elsewhere. And if you oppose us, then you are a radical and you are an enemy of peace. So this is much more complex than actually what Netanyahu and Mahmoud Abbas are saying are doing. This is one of the most significant American political investments in the Middle East, I would say, since the late 70s with the Camp David agreement all the way until today. And that's why I was saying earlier that I think Donald Trump might be good in the sense that he would actually give us the clarity, because this is a demagogue. This is a populist person with very little patience, does not know how to play any political games. This is a guy who, according to his memoir, or not rather his autobiography, this is a guy who says, just talk to me for 30 seconds and I'm going to answer from my guts. He's a guy who makes decisions so haphazardly. He is not able to play such a massive and complex game that have been played by several administrations one after the other. It should give Palestinians the needed clarity to understand that you can't be chasing or betting on the American horse anymore. It's either you devise an alternative strategy, reach out to new allies, reach out to the South. We have neglected the South entirely. It is where the popular support for the Palestinian people have been throughout the years, throughout the decades. We have invested in Washington back and forth, knowing fully that we will never come back with anything that is worthwhile. Now Donald Trump is putting us in this amazing dilemma. Do we want to maintain this charade in order for us to get a little bit of money at the end of the day? Or do we want to revisit our national priorities and challenge this American hegemony altogether?
Ramsey, okay, you make a really good point here. So now you're in a marriage, Palestine and America, and you're the second wife and you're not loved over Israel. Now you know that. So now America doesn't love you, and America's been playing a game with you, and your children aren't going to inherit one penny from your husband. Now you know this. And basically he said to you with this new voice, Trump, we don't care about you. Israel is the one. David Friedman and my son-in-law, Jared Kushner, is going to squelch you into the bottom of the earth. Now what do? You wrote that there's a big party in Moscow, but Putin is unreliable. There are 1.25 million Russians living in Israel right now who have connections to Putin. That's not reliable. You say the South, I presume you mean Africa by that, or South America, I'm not sure. But they don't have any ability to fight America. So what do you do now that you have this clarity? That's what I want to know. What do you do with this clarity?
Excellent. Thank you for that question, David. And I'm not really, my reference to the conference between Hamas and Fatah, I've been close to some of the people involved in the talks. And I was told how whenever Egypt, for example, tried to host a reconciliation conference between the competing Palestinian rivals, Hamas and Fatah, they always needed a green light from the Americans in order for them to proceed or not. And I was told point blank that Omar Suleiman, was the chief intelligence, or the chief of Egyptian intelligence, used to actually leave the people, the Hamas and Fatah people, arguing in Cairo. And one time he actually flew to Washington, D.C., met with Condoleezza Rice, came back and told them, no, your agreement is off. But we agree, we have no problem. Can we please proceed? No, we're not going to allow it. Now, when they went to Russia, I don't think Russia has that kind of sway. Whether we like Russia or hate Russia, that's not the point. What I am saying is we need to break away from that stronghold of the Qataris and the Saudis and the Turks and the Americans and the French, and venture out to actually possibly locate new alliances, or at least try to play some sort of a political game that we are not just constantly coming begging the Americans for scraps.
Okay, Ramsey. Okay, I love this.
Okay.
I love this.
But just a very quick point, if you would kindly allow me. But however, I think a Palestinian strategy cannot possibly be the outcome of an intellectual thought, no matter how intelligent or not. We have to have the Palestinian people, Hamas, Fatah, the PLO, the Palestine National Council, people at home and in diaspora, meeting and talking and yielding new strategy, something that revived the old, what we call the Palestine constant, that would allow our people to actually formulate a strategy that does not is not hostage to American diktats, is not hostage. I mean, remember Condoleezza Rice when she said point blank to the Palestinian Authority, you make a deal with Hamas, we will not give you a dime. We need to free ourselves from the chains of financial needs.
Okay, I get that. Okay, but first of all, Condoleezza Rice had no problem with Israel having members of its government say all Palestinians are devils, and the Justice Minister, Tzipi Livni, saying all Palestinian pregnant women should be killed because they carry snakes in their wombs. So Condoleezza Rice can kiss my tuchus. Now, let me say this. You make a good point about an alliance that you need. But let's look at your situation in Palestine from my point of view. Egypt's president, al-Sisi, a dictator, is an absolute servant of Israel. He does exactly what Israel tells him to do, and we know that from that recent UN resolution. And he overthrew the Muslim Brotherhood because that was a threat to Israel. Assad has been a long-term Mossad agent, recruited when he was a student in London, and he does anything Israel tells him to do. They want to keep Assad for one reason. As long as Assad is there, there will be no international claim to the Golan Heights, and Israel gets to keep that water. King Jordan, Egypt is a whore of Israel. Syria is a whore of Israel. King Abdullah is a mistress. He's not really a whore. He's a beloved mistress of Israel who keeps the Palestinians locked in their ghettos on the West Bank. So we know Jordan, Syria, and Egypt are all servants of Israel, and Lebanon has no power. And we know this, and yet Israel tells us in America, we're surrounded by enemies. We're surrounded by enemies. They will kill us at any moment. In fact, Israel is surrounded by servants and allies who aren't going to lift a finger to do anything to them, and especially not for the Palestinians. Now, India, a superpower, has been diminished by the corrupt Mossad, who has absolutely formed military ties with the Trump of India. And India is no hope. South America is no hope. Africa has no means. That only leaves one country in the world. And that country could write a check to Palestine for $10 billion every day of the week and never miss it. And that's China. And my question to you is, why have you delayed giving China a foothold in the Middle East, something it would love to possess? Why have the Palestinians not worked with China, the only country that could really trick America as it wants to do? Why haven't you worked with China?
I think that's a really good point, David. Couple of things first. Though any national liberation movement, in the world, whether those that succeeded or those who reached some sort of a political compromise, have fought against incredible odds. I was just recently revisiting some of the writings of Frantz Fanon about his time with the Algerian Revolution, and it's really their situation, in a way, maybe even looked more desperate than ours right now, because we have an international solidarity movement and a very large and growing boycott and divestment movement and working with many, many civil societies around the world. But on the other hand, if you look at the Algerian revolution, they really worked under terrible, insurmountable odds and lost over 1 million. It's a country of the 1 million martyr, it's called, you see. Yet somehow they prevailed. Somehow you just work with what you have, you develop strategies, you rely on the just relentlessness and the resistance of your own people. So whether Sisi is a collaborator or not, and he is, whether the rest of the Arabs are, sold out or not, which they have, ultimately it's going to be the Palestinian people who would have to use their mobilization and their own energies to liberate themselves. Now, about China, I lived in Asia for a few years, and I visited China, and I met with some people from the top party there. And the thing is, it seems to me that China is intentionally trying to they are showing aggression, or rather a backbone when it comes to the South and East Asia, China seas. They are trying to mark and demarcate their own territories, telling the Americans, you stay out of this area and that area, but they haven't really yet shaped a very clear, decisive foreign policy agenda. They came quite close in Libya and in Sudan because they have large investments there, but they haven't really made it clear that even if the Palestinians do reach out to China, and I think they should, and I think they are, to a degree they are, but they haven't done enough. But even if they do, I think ultimately it will be the Chinese decision to expand its political horizon to that part of the world, and it's not. And I think the moment that China is ready, I definitely think that Palestinians and Arabs have got to really move to China and make a thing out of it, reach some sort of political solidarity. And there is so much historically to build on in China and in that part of the world. In fact, when I spoke about the Japanese occupation of Manchuria and other parts of China to help them relate to what an Israeli occupation would be like, you'd be surprised of how immediately you create that trap between you and a people that supposedly know nothing about your situation. So you're absolutely right. And I think Palestinians should be keen on this, although I think it's slightly more complex than that.
Can I make a point? I have a completely different take when it comes to Donald Trump and the Palestinians. And I think that Donald Trump is such a narcissist, such an egotist, and I think he wants to make the ultimate deal. He wants his legacy to show that he was able to broker peace between the Palestinians and the Israelis. I think, Thursday night when he sort of put Israel on notice, it was rather weak notice, that any more settlement building in the West Bank would not be helpful to a brokered peace. I think that was jaw-dropping as far as I was concerned, because he did go back to the two-state solution, which of course could be just simply carrying on the tradition of letting Israel go ahead and there never being a two-state solution. But I still think he's such an egotist that that's what he wants to do. And so I think that may play a part into this. And of course, he had just talked to King Abdullah, King of Jordan, and they always said about Donald Trump that he listens to the last person in the room. And of course, we have Netanyahu coming on the 15th of February, so I guess he'll listen to him too. But I still think he's got a hankering to be known as the American president that brought peace to the Israelis and the Palestinians.
I would like to say on that.
One second. I've got a question that's come in from Mike Ormsby, who's a journalist and also a friend, originally from Liverpool. Then went on to Wales. He's currently living in Transylvania. And he wants to ask you this question, because funny enough he should want to ask you this question. It's one that I've got up on my board, ready to ask myself in a different way, but I'll ask it the way that Mike has sent it. Says Trump said that he'll move the U.S. embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. On the other hand, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has said prospects for peace in the region will suffer if Trump does indeed move the U.S. embassy there. So his question is, what do you think about the two positions, and does the location of the embassy matter?
Not going to happen.
Sorry.
It's not going to happen.
That's what I think. I don't think it's going to happen. I think that he's got too much to lose, Trump does, with trying to broker this peace. And I think that King Abdullah probably put a little fear into him about doing it. I know that the Palestinian spokesperson made it clear that the prospects for peace would be lost forever, and that he himself would resign. And Israel, I'm not sure that that's what they really want either, because, they've made these sort of tentative, cautious agreements with other Arab countries, Saudi Arabia, the United Emirates, and Qatar.
Jordan.
And I'm sorry.
Jordan.
And I think that Israel knows that if the American embassy is moved to Jerusalem, that's going to pretty much disturb those agreements, if not violate them altogether. And you're going to have the Arab public opinion in these countries, Arab countries, so inflamed that the comment was made that the U.S. would have to remove their embassies. So there's a lot of concern about this move, and I don't think he's going to do it.
Okay, so Carol thinks that Donald Trump is eager to broker a peace deal between Palestine and Israel. What's your view on that, Ramsey?
Kervin, could I interrupt a second?
Absolutely.
Ramsey, I'd like to give my comment first because I think your comment carries more weight. Would that be okay with you?
Yes, of course, go for it. And I think that your comment carries as much weight, if not more. So carry
Well, I don't know about that. But first of all, let me dispense with the Jerusalem issue. I think that moving Jerusalem would be the provocation for a general support of war against the Palestinians by America and Israel combined. I think to do that would be a declaration of war by the United States of America, and there should be no doubt about that. And France has warned against it, and so has Germany. So I agree with Carol, but my reason for disagreeing is different than hers. So secondly, I think if Trump moved the embassy to Jerusalem, there would be no Trump Tower or building left standing in the world if I were a Palestinian. I would take revenge. Secondly, I would like to address the situation that Carol brought up earlier about Trump's narcissism wanting to develop a peace. I tend to agree, Carol, more with Ramsey, that the entire peace process from 1967 has been a charade. It is a cynical response, but it's one based on empirical skepticism. It is a charade to let Israel do whatever it wants. And the proof of that is it's like a grandfather saying, I don't like my grandchildren going out at night, but on the side giving them $100 every night to go out. You follow me? So in fact, he's doing it. So let me say this about Trump. Some of his strongest supporters in the United States were right-wing Jews in Palm Beach and Palm Springs, the wealthiest people in the world. And they are radical supporters of his. They're so radical. I have Jewish friends in Palm Beach who won't even speak about Trump for fear of losing their membership in restaurants and clubs. These people support him. And when you look at the Jews who support him, and you look at Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, who pays money, over $600,000 for illegal settlements in the West Bank, David Friedman, his ambassador, Cohen, his lawyer, and when you look at the United States Congress, if you think for 1 second any human less than a divine human being, and we know what happened to the last divine human, I think he got crucified. So I think if you look at Donald Trump, a narcissist who wants to be loved, as being able to go against that Jewish influence, that his own son-in-law, his own ambassador, his own lawyers, and the Congress of the United States of America, you're dreaming. It ain't gonna happen. Now, Ramsey, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, that's all right. So I think it's important that we kind of denote what Israel wants. You have the so-called peace process, this constant, media fight, the Americans with their, Barack Obama started with George Mitchell and then, John Kerry and so forth, pushing the peace process back and forth. Nothing ever happened. But during all that time, Israel has been operating based on a very, very clear plan that's independent from all of this. And I feel like in some way, I feel like most of us are kind of hoodwinked into kind of getting involved in a debate that's practically is almost irrelevant as far as Israel is concerned.
Yeah.
Israel wants one thing and one thing only. They want Palestinian land and they don't want the Palestinians. So that's it. They want settlements. They want to annex illegal settlements. They want to, they want Jerusalem to be completely out of any discussion or any debate. And they perceive Palestinians as people. They perceive them to be a demographic threat. That kind of takes us to this. Moving the embassy to Jerusalem. Yes, that will be a great deal of validation to the Israeli claim that Jerusalem is the internal capital of the Jewish state, as has been the case supposedly for 3,000 years. I'm a student of history, and I have no idea what that reference is to anyway. But let's say that this is really a major political achievement, moving the embassy because of the validation of the Israeli claim. But there is a much more urgent, in my opinion, Israeli priority. And that is expanding the settlements and controlling as much of the land as possible in accordance to a plan that has been respected by every Israeli government way before Netanyahu was even in the political business in the first place. And I think for them, if they have to make a choice, I think they would just continue to quietly or loudly developing their settlements, and they would leave the issue of the embassy until later. I think since Trump came to power, Israel has issued permits and approval of 8,000 new units in illegal settlements in Jerusalem and in the West Bank. Not just that, for the first time in nearly 20 years, they approved of the creation of an entirely new settlement. The Israeli argument has always been about natural expansion of existing settlements. Now they are constructing new settlements. There is a new bill in the Israeli Knesset where they want to include hundreds of so-called illegal settlement outposts. These are mini settlements built by various radical extremist groups without government permission. Now they want to legalize all of them. There is a bonanza in Israel. There is a sense of euphoria in the Israeli government that now we can do all of this. And you know what? If it means that we have to wait a little bit longer to move the embassy, so what? It's a symbolic gesture anyway. We will wait, but we will completely take advantage of this political blank check that Trump is giving us to build settlements, and that is Israel's ultimate aim anyway.
Okay, so what is the real significance of where the embassy is? Why does it really matter where the embassy is? Explain that for our listeners, please.
The embassy matters a great deal because of this. In the early 1990s, there has been a change in the political mood in the United States. The rise of the evangelical power base in America led to a great deal of influence on the Congress. Now, the Congress has always been pro-Israel, thoroughly pro-Israel, as much as the White House has been pro-Israel as well. But the White House always thinks pragmatically. Yes, we are pro-Israel, but we have to keep numerous political balances in account. The Congress doesn't care as much about these political balances. So in 1995, they passed a resolution, or rather a bill, that would that called on the State Department to move the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Enough with this. We love Israel. It's all about Israel. Why are we not honoring Israel's relationship to its holy city? In fact, if you look at that, the text of that bill, it's almost written by someone who's an expert in the Bible, in religious studies. It was not even a political bill as much as it was a religious one. The White House did not honor that. They kept pushing until 1999. They passed another bill saying that if the State Department does not do this, we are going to cut the spending, the budget of the State House. I mean, they went to that extent to punish the State Department for not honoring that bill of 1995. Now, why was all of this important? Because it happened right in the middle of the whole peace process. 1993 was the signing of Oslo. 1995, the Palestinians and the Israelis were still talking. The White House said, I don't have a problem with that, but let them reach an agreement first. And it has been that way ever since. A move to that embassy, as Carol has said, will end the whole peace process, Sharad, because that was really the...
Ramsey, let me interrupt. Kervin, with all due respect to our listeners, and to Carol, exactly what just happened is exactly why Israel wants the embassy to be a subject. Because Ramsey and you have just spent 15 minutes talking about something that, as Carol said, isn't going to happen without a general war and is a distraction. Who cares about the embassy? What I care about is that Israel is building 8,000 new units for illegal settlers, a lot from Brooklyn, New York, in violation of a United Nations resolution that was unanimous. And when a Palestinian throws a rock at a soldier, that soldier can go to his home, tear it down, burn it down, bulldozer the olive trees, and take the land for Israeli settlers. That is the issue. The embassy is a distraction while they steal land, pour gasoline down Palestinian children's throats, burn them alive, kill them, have soldiers shoot them and execute them on the street, and no one says a word. They're all talking about a stupid embassy. I want to talk about why Israel burns down the home and demolishes the home of a Palestinian family because somebody throws a rock and doesn't touch the family of children who go and make a Palestinian child drink gasoline and burn him to death. These are the issues we must focus on to bring legitimacy, humanity, and justice to these people. And we know that Ted Cruz and other Republicans recently voted to stop all protective money, that is security money, for United States embassies in the world until we move the embassy. What does that tell you? They'd rather have 200 United States ambassadors and thousands of employees from Canada to Bangladesh to China threatened instead of funding Israel. Now that is to me beyond reason when a Congress puts the value of moving an embassy 45 miles away over the security and safety after all of their Benghazi propaganda in America of United States foreign diplomats. And that is what Ramsey is talking about. So when we consider the fact that 47 United States senators wrote a personal letter in violation of American law to the dictator of Iran, telling the Ayatollah to pay no mind to that black president in the White House, that they know what's best and they better not offend Israel. And this Iran arms deal offends Israel, and therefore you better not do it because we're going to tear it down. It tells you something about a Congress of the United States that will bow down to Netanyahu and Israel by putting our foreign diplomats at safety and major international agreement to limit nuclear weapons at safety, and the possible prosperity and peace of the entire world at safety by provoking a war. And those are the issues that we must focus on, not moving a little embassy, which is a nice little Trump distraction that allows us to debate something that is meaningless while 8,000 Israeli terrorists move into Palestine.
I have a question for both of you. Do you think that the new settlement that the Israelis say they're going to build in the West Bank to take care of the settlers that were evicted from Amona, do you think that after Trump said what he did Thursday night about not announcing any new Israeli settlements, do you think that will keep them from moving ahead with their plans?
No, of course not. Absolutely not.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think.
Can I ask you one question? Was anybody surprised that Donald Trump's administration on Thursday night told Israel to stop constructing new
settlements? He didn't say anything. Wait. He didn't say that. Here's what he said. Let's get this fact straight, okay? Here's what happened. Israel cut off the leg of Palestine, and Donald Trump said, "Oh, Israel, here's a little Band-Aid. Can you help them out?" I mean, get a life. All he said was, this may contribute to us having issues with restarting a dead process. Oh, my God, he kicked a dead man. Oh, how terrible.
But he didn't have to say anything.
He didn't have to say anything, but he had to say something for one reason only, because the king of Saudi Arabia said, and the king of Jordan said, calm down.
Do you know, are you surprised at the wave? And I don't even want to switch to Trump at a minute because we're on the Gaza, but are you surprised at the wave of support that he still gets, even when you consider how the people of the world are protesting right across the world, but yet he is still getting a wave of support within the infrastructure of politics? How does that work?
I don't think he's getting much support. I mean, there are two things. You can look at the horror of the Trump presidency. And I mean, if you're going to follow it, you're going to get whiplash because it's happening so fast. One horrible act after another. But there's another side to this, and that is the extreme protests that are going on right now. I was talking to a friend of mine in Palestine last Saturday in Gaza, and he brought it up about the Muslim ban. And he said, I was watching the protests on television, and he said, I love the American people. I pray to Allah to save and help the American people. Now, I hope that every Muslim that looked at those protests could think the same way. Yeah. But there is something else going on here, and it's not passing. It's not transitional. It's going to be a very potent force. And I think the world recognizes that. They're protesting along with us.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. The protests have reached right here in the UK. And, you know, down to
London was wonderful. Yeah. London was wonderful, and I thank every one of them that was out there.
Can I ask Ramsey a question? Ramsey, let me ask you something. We know that weapons don't work because Israel has everything America has and more. We know that terrorism doesn't work. Look at the Olympics and 72 and the ostracization. Have the Palestinian people never considered the Gandhi approach? Do you realize that 5 million Palestinians could bring Israel to an economic halt just by peaceful means? I mean, do you realize that if 5 million Palestinians, without guns, without rocks, without any violence, could bring Israel to an end just by peaceful, like the American blacks did, sit-ins and marches and gatherings and assemblies, the whole world would come to watch 1 million Palestinians sitting at that wall, sitting at the desert frontiers of Gaza.
I actually think that there is this misconception that Palestinians haven't tried the Gandhi approach. I actually don't even like to make comparisons in that sense, because I do believe that every national liberation movement in the world is situated within very specific historical context and different reality that you can't just mimic any revolution anywhere, that are separated by a different, a whole host of cultural, religious, geographical, and other reasons. That's number one. Number two, I think that Palestinians have, in fact, and I've reported on all Palestinian intifadas so far, and I wrote a lot about the first Palestinian uprising in 1936 that started with a strike. It was one of the most well-organized strikes that lasted for 6 months. It was against the Zionists, and it was also against the British colonialists in Palestine at the time. And to actually think that a society was so evolved at that time and had the kind of political consciousness, despite of the poverty and the fact that it was mostly agrarian society, that actually still managed to pull off such a peaceful, well-organized mobilization and continue to do so until this day, I think it's really quite astonishing. And I think some of this even preceded Gandhi. But that's not my point. My point is this. Israel doesn't care. Palestinians in Gaza are being killed, as you said, children being kidnapped and and burned alive by having gasoline poured down their throat. We are not looking here into, this is not London, where police officers for a long time walked around in the streets with no guns. We are talking about people being shot and killed as if there is some sort of a silly game that the soldiers have been playing. So I really don't think that if Palestinians are to decide that there is the only resistance option that they have are just peaceful means and of mobilization, I don't think it would mean squat for the Israelis, because they have been killing Palestinians peacefully or not peacefully protesting. As far as they are concerned, BDS activists are terrorists by the Israeli government diktats, as much as a Palestinian in Gaza carrying a Kalashnikov is also a terrorist. That said, I don't see a violent solution to this. I believe that people have the right to resist. They have moral obligation to resist, and they choose the means of resistance as they see fit. But from a rational point of view, I think that really the Palestinian resistance that's going to matter at the end of the day is their ability, their continuity, their resilience, their ability to survive every Israeli attempt at crushing the Palestinian collective as a whole, the Palestinian culture. This is why there is such a major war the Israelis are launching on trying to rename Arab streets by Hebrew names and trying to completely erase Palestinian history and any references to Palestinian existence. For them, the real threat is the Palestinian. And as long as the Palestinian is there, remembering and fighting and celebrating his culture and resisting, the culture of resistance is what really matters here, not resistance as a gun. I mean, look at the Palestinian Authority, David. They have thousands and thousands of guns. These are guns that have been supplied by the Americans and trained by the CIA. But these guns don't matter at all. So it's not really about firepower. It's about the idea, the culture of resistance by a child somewhere in the Balata refugee camp or in Deheshe or in Hebron. It's about someone standing up and saying, I will not be defeated. And that's what Palestinians are ultimately doing. What kind of a strategy works or doesn't, I assure you that peaceful means of resistance and mobilization have been used in Palestine since the very beginning. And if you are to think of this in terms of percentage, when was the last time that you saw a major Palestinian military operation against Israel? The resistance that we hear about every single day is just the resistance of ordinary people. And that's what really has defined the Palestinian revolution after all these years.
You know, the funny thing is all you ever get nowadays is, kids throwing stones and soldiers firing back with weapons. You're quite right, Ramsey, when you talk about there's not really been a resistance, not for many years, not like we've known in the past of resistance. So, where will the real battle be fought and won, as far as bringing peace in that region is concerned?
I have a question for all three of you, really. With the unanimous passing of the United Nations Security Council Resolution 2334, it seems to me that it really gives the impetus to the prosecutor in the ICC, International Criminal Court, to go ahead and open the full investigation of settlements. There is a preliminary investigation going on now, but it seems to me like this gives her the power to go ahead with the full investigation. And I think that this could be very successful. You know, as far as jurisdiction goes, the ICC, the prosecutor, does not have jurisdiction when the concerned country itself conducts investigations. So as far as war crimes in Gaza, you can have the IDF saying, well, we went ahead and investigated this, found nothing, of course, they would say that. And so the jurisdiction is a little hazy there. But that's not true with the case with settlements. It's not like Israel can say we investigated it if we're making settlements and we found nothing. They can't exactly do that. So I think that the jurisdiction issue is completely clear. And so my hope is that she will go ahead and after all the settlement activity goes right back to the prime minister, who would be accused of a war crime, because the resolution found that settlement activity is a flagrant violation of international law, and that makes it a war crime.
Do you want to jump in there, Ramsey?
I think the resolution was just another reminder, really, that the international community more or less is united in the face of Israel as far as illegal violations of human rights and human rights record in the West Bank, Gaza, and Jerusalem. I think that's what it is. I think for any law to have value and to have enough guts so that it's actually able to make a difference, there has got to be enough political will. And that's really the question. I mean, we went after Ariel Sharon to try him for war crimes in Belgium, and we had every evidence you can possibly think of that would convict him for war crimes repeatedly, crimes against humanity, crimes against peace, and so forth and so on. But we failed. And we failed not because we did not have the legal precedent and because we did not have enough papers to create that conviction, but rather because the Americans just stepped up and they said, listen, you convict him and, we are going to severe diplomatic ties. They threatened Belgium, and Belgium had to revise its own law. The same way that Britain is now revising its own law to prevent any attempted arrest of the likes of Tzipi Livni and others whenever they come to visit the UK. So these countries are willing to re-examine their own laws to prevent any prosecution of Israeli war criminals. Now, in using that model, I don't really see, for the time being, I do think that Palestinians should push as hard as they can in that front. But I don't think that, I'm as optimistic as Carol, as in the possible outcome of this. Donald Trump is still there. Britain is still there. Now, Theresa May is really kind of, her true colors are coming to the fore here. And we know that we don't have the needed political will that will ultimately make a difference.
I would like to add to that. I believe that law, I think what Ramsey just said was brilliant. Law is ultimately the exercise of political will. If the law, those who enforce the law like you, you have nothing to fear. If they don't like you, you have everything to fear. And in this case, the current international law, because of America's strength, likes Israel, and it has nothing to fear. There's going to be no Milosevic trial for anybody in Israel, even if he turned out to be Heinrich Himmler himself. Now, the law that will matter is this. The law that the U.S. State Department, President, and Congress cannot influence, and Donald Trump learned that this week, is the United States federal courts. It cannot affect the United States federal courts. Recently, and this may be Palestine's great hope, this is an unbelievable opportunity for Palestine. Last year, Congress, because a lot of people in New York City did not get enough money from Saudi Arabia and Iraq, and not Iraq, but Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states and Egypt that supported those terrorists, those 19 terrorists, 15 from Saudi Arabia to attack America on 9/11. Congress, above the wishes of the President, Obama, passed a law. Obama vetoed it. And then Congress overrode that law and passed it. And it gave American citizens affected by terrorist acts that are unjust in other countries to sue those sovereign nations. For the first time in history, in American federal courts, you can sue a country that has done you damage.
That's going on right now.
Wait a minute. President Obama told Israel, if you push for this law, because a lot of those people who made the suit were Jewish New Yorkers, if you push for this law against Saudi Arabia, it will come back to bite you. Today, in federal courts, Palestinian Americans who have family and property in Palestine being destroyed by Israel's actions are suing Israel in federal court for damages. And that is going to be the law that holds far more than any international law. And I believe Ramsey, and Carol knows about this too, that will be your hope. Because once a federal court rules, there is nothing that anything in the U.S. government can do. Trump can't even reverse a federal court on this Muslim ban. Now you will say, well, the Supreme Court may reverse it. The Supreme Court cannot reverse it because it is a law that Congress enacted for a specific purpose that does not violate the Constitution. And therefore, the only thing that can happen is when Israel starts paying the cost for this, Congress will try to reverse the law, and then the mud will be on their faces.
You know, Palestine is on the hearts of many people right across the world, and I suppose the world is watching to see how that progresses. Whether it be Donald Trump, prior to him it was Obama, president after president have stepped into the White House with an eagerness to be responsible for bringing about the peace. Is there any possibility that Donald Trump can evaluate some sort of peace between Israel and Palestine in this 4 years that he's got?
I personally don't think so. Not because I'm a pessimist, although if I were, I would be justified. But because to achieve peace, you have to have the willingness. I think you and I, Kervin, if we have whatever disagreement, if there is enough will on your side and enough will on my side, goodwill that is, I think we can sort it out.
Absolutely.
But if your purpose is really not, you're not at all concerned with achieving any sort of compromise, you don't care, you have a whole agenda in your mind, and you are so focused for all of these years trying to get that agenda done, you don't care whether Ramsey and I are friends or not. And I think this is what it is with Israel. Israel has been operating since 1947-48 based on this thing that they call Plan D, Plan Dalet. They have basically constructed an entire nation and a state based on this. 1967, the Yalon Plan. How do we conquer the rest of historic Palestine? And it has been achieved with a great deal of excellence. Now, how do we get as much of that land as possible? This is for Israel the thing. It's not about whether Kushner is really going to, be any different than George Mitchell. And of course, we know that Kushner is even way below any possible, chance of being a peacemaker here. But it's not about that at all. It's about whomever is in the White House, whomever is the peace envoy, whatever the discourse that is coming out of Washington, it doesn't matter. Israel is focused. Israel wants settlements, wants the land, and wants Palestinians out. And I think we have to kind of really understand this. And of course, they would have to achieve this regardless of the violence. Israel's violence is not random. A lot of people say Israel's random violence. It's not random. It's very well calculated. No matter how gruesome no matter how aggressive the Israeli military is, it's always part of an overall political agenda. They work very well together, the Israeli government, the extremist settlers, and the IDF, the Israeli army. They have been coordinating, and that's what really matters. And this is why I think David said that earlier, we should not allow ourselves to be distracted from the gist of this debate. The debate is, how do we deny Israel the opportunity to create an apartheid regime? And it is an apartheid regime as it is, at the expense of Palestinians. It's a fight over human rights. It's a fight over equality. It's a fight, over equal citizenship. And let me say this very quick, and I know I'm taking more than my fair share here. But let me say this very quick. The fact is, since Israel occupied the remaining parts of historic Palestine, the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem, in 1967, virtually we are living in a one state, Kervin. Yeah. The Palestinians and the Israelis are living on a piece of land. The Israelis are taking way more than their fair share. They are stealing way more than their fair share of water from the West Bank aquifers. But they just want to live according to different rules. Streets that are for Jews only, settlements and land for Jews only, graveyards for Jews only. And Palestinians are beholden to this racist discriminatory law that sees them as lesser, as subhumans. We need to change that. We need to change that whole agenda. And we need to say, no, Palestinians and Israelis living within the same piece of land as it is now, they would have to share. There has got to be an equal, they have to be equal before the law. And once you achieve that effectively, there is that one state solution. They think we are ridiculous for proposing this. It's really far less ridiculous accepting that in the 21st century, Kervin, we have to accept the fact that we are living by apartheid regime standards, by these archaic laws that discriminate between people based on the color of their skin or their ethnicity or their religion or their nationality. This is absolutely ridiculous and absurd, and it has got to end immediately. And I think that's our focus.
Ramsey, I love that plea, and everybody knows it who knows what's happening. But let me address this to Kervin and to Carol as well. Anyone who has read your article, I love it. It's called Enough Fear-Mongering. I think that's a great article, Enough Fear-Mongering. First of all, let's speak about 67. If you go to anyone in the United States of America, I mean anyone, and I'm a PhD in history, medieval European history. If you go even to the most educated people among my group, and you say, who started the 67 war? 99% of them will say the Arabs started the war. They have no idea that the 1967 war was a preemptive war initiated by Israel with the sole purpose of taking in those necessary farmlands in the Golan Heights and in the West Bank of Israel. And that is exactly what they did. They used Nasser's alliance with Russia to justify a war that acquired for them a huge quantity of land that they have never surrendered except for those parts of Egypt that were absolutely of no use to Israel in the first place, the Sinai Desert. So that's the first issue, propaganda and branding a war of aggression for the purpose of theft. That's number one. Secondly, and this is extremely important, the Golan Heights were annexed in the 1980s illegally by Israel, and they continue to use that illegal land as they choose and to steal water. And the question is, why did the Arab world, why did the United Nations, and why have the United States accepted that de facto aggression, no different than taking of Crimea by Russia, for which Russia earned sanctions, but Israel earned nothing. And third, I want to say this, that Jews, and I am a Jew, have a schizophrenic personality disorder. On the one hand, Jews all over the world demand, absolutely demand, that there be no anti-Semitism and that we be accepted as full members of every community and nation in which we live. But on the other hand, Jews demand the right to exclude everybody from the Jewish community. We eat separate food. We only take Jewish wives. We have Jewish schools, Jewish education, Jewish marriages, Jewish cemeteries, Jewish hospitals. We have things that exclude the entire world. To become a convert to Judaism is basically impossible. Even if you converted, like Ivanka Trump, to Judaism, Ivanka Trump does not live the life of a modern Jew, modern Orthodox Jew, and therefore she and her husband receive all these dispensations to be a part of the power world. So here is the basic schizophrenia. Jews demand that we be included in the world, but we also demand the right to exclude everyone from our world. And that schizophrenia is exactly the root cause of what Ramsey has described as apartheid in Israel. Israel demands for the Jews acceptance by the world, but it also demands the world stamp an approval on their exclusion and apartheid state for the Palestinian people, who by our own faith are in God's image made. And until that schizophrenia and hypocrisy and double standard are called out and the world demands justice, nothing will happen. But the key issue in this interview I would like for us to leave with is listening to a bright Palestinian who writes brilliantly, who does not offend the Jewish community with his writings, nor the Palestinian. I would like him to say, now that we have taken the clothes off the emperor of the charade of a peace process, and we have stripped the hypocrisy and the willing impotence of the American nation to play a fair broker, what do we have to look forward to, knowing that Israel will agree to nothing less than a unified state based in apartheid separation of the peoples, with the Palestinians as second class? What do we have to look forward to say that will not happen? And secondly, I go back to my initial question, Ramsey. What will happen if Israel gets its way and opens up a war with Iran?
Right. I think that there is a historical imperative here. And I think the experience in South Africa, although it's not applicable in an identical sense, it can be really quite interesting and enlightening for us to understand that there is going to be a historical imperative that you can't separate people based on race and ethnicity and one group oppressing the other for eternity. There's got to be a cutting, a point where that is no longer permissible. And the key to actually get to that point is enough people have to actually understand what is going on in Palestine. The fact that many Americans are actually under the impression that Palestinians are occupying Israeli land, it's unfathomable. It's just ridiculous. And I think we are partly responsible for failing to get the message out. That's number one. Number two, I do think that we need to change our thinking about this so-called conflict. It's not a conflict. There's a group of people who are the remnants of colonial imperialist powers of the 19th and early 20th century that created this perfect system for themselves in which they enjoy all the perks of someone else's country while treating that person as if a subhuman. And we need to understand this. We can't be repeating these terminologies that there is an Arab-Israeli conflict. You said it yourself, David. Was said earlier, what conflict? Is Sisi in conflict? Is Egypt at war with Israel? So why are we still, using that old terminology from 1967 and prior to that of an Arab-Israeli conflict? There is a state that is oppressing another nation, denying the indigenous people of that land their rights. They need their rights, and that's that. And we need to march behind them, and we need to try to understand them and understand things from their point of view. They are not audience in this situation. They are the core of the story, and we have to understand it. And that's why I appreciate your efforts and the efforts of many other people out there who are really trying to bring the Palestinians back to the center of this narrative. I also think that we can't be thinking of this as a foreign conflict happening somewhere else. I think the future of the Middle East, and I think so much is at stake for humanity at large, because this is not a conflict between Palestinians and Israelis, but it is rather something that where the American government itself, the U.S. Army has been used in the past, various Western powers find themselves directly involved in this. And I don't want to venture out to talk about violence and terrorism as a whole, but trust me, this is a conflict that is multifaceted. And if we care about the future of the human race and humanity in the Middle East and beyond, we need to bring this protracted, unjust story to an end. The historical precedent, or rather the historical imperative, it lies in the fact that if Israel was capable of eradicating Palestinians from the face of the earth, they would have done it. They tried to do it. There was massive ethnic cleansing in 1948, ethnic cleansing in 1967. Since 1967, 250,000 Palestinians have been ethnically cleansed in this slow genocide, as Ilan Pappé calls it. So we are seeing all of this, yet somehow you and I and Carol and Kervin are still talking about a Palestinian people and a Palestinian-Israeli so-called conflict. There is a story that has not yet ended for 70 years, and it has not ended not because the lack of trying on the part of Israel, but rather because the Palestinians are still fighting. And that's why we must support them, unconditionally support Palestinian resistance, unconditionally. They know exactly what they are doing, in the sense that for 70 years, despite of their factionalism, despite of the many mistakes they committed, at the end of the day, they are still imposing their suffering and their story and their resistance at the heart of the discussion anywhere in the world. And I think there is an achievement in that. Finally, I would like to say that we are no longer talking about an Egyptian army and a Jordanian army. That got us nothing in the first place. We are talking about a growing civil society all over the world. I know the U.S., we are yet to have a success story in the U.S. I hope we are getting there. But in the rest of the world, from Britain to the Netherlands, to France, to Spain, to Italy, to South Africa, to Russia and elsewhere, there is a growing consciousness of the Palestinian struggle and the Palestinian suffering. We need to harness these energies. We need to harness them based on a very, very clear message. We want to boycott Israeli apartheid, not Israelis and as individuals. We want to punish the government that has been punishing defenseless people for 70 years. We want them to know that there is accountability and there is a price to be paid for your actions and for this genocide, active and slow genocide against the Palestinian people. The thousands of children and civilians who perished in Gaza in 2014 and 2012 and 2008 and 9 and before that and after that, there is a price tag to be paid for the suffering of these people. They matter. They should not be living hostages under siege, despite the fact that half of the Gaza Strip is destroyed right now and tens of thousands of people are still homeless. We need to understand them. We need to support them. We need to be in solidarity with them. And we need to tell the rest of the world that by boycotting Israel, we are not boycotting Jews. To the contrary, we welcome, we embrace our Jewish brothers and sisters who are working with us to achieve a just end to this conflict. We welcome that. And we are not anti-Semites by boycotting Israel. To the contrary, we are saying it's about time that Israel is held accountable. It's the only country on earth that had absolutely no sense of accountability whatsoever. And this needs to end today.
You know, I couldn't actually agree with you more. And that is so powerful, Ramzi, in every respect. But who is going to stand up to Israel?
Eventually sanctions, I hope. You know, if it gets to be the annexation of the West Bank and apartheid Israel, then I'm hoping that the international community will come forward and make their displeasure known through sanctions, um, and I mean serious sanctions that will force the Israelis to do something different.
I don't think there'll ever be sanctions because, let's face it, the United States has a law, and that law is very clear. And it was passed by Congress and signed by a president. And this is what it says. Any nation that has access to any nuclear fissile material, either for peaceful or military means, must be a member of the International Atomic Nuclear Energy Agency in Vienna, Austria. Russia belongs, China belongs, the USA belongs. All countries of the world belong. Whether you
Iran
have a
belongs. At least Iran has signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty.
No, Iran belongs to the IAEA in Vienna also. The only two countries in the world that do not belong are North Korea and Israel. And yet Israel gets $38 billion from us in the next 10 years. They probably received $1 trillion from us over the last 40 years or more. And they don't have to abide by the law. This goes back to what Ramsey said. So sanctions are never going to be effective because Israel only needs one trading partner in the world. That's the United States of America. And all the rest of the world could sanction Israel, and America could write a check for all of its needs, including abortion and everything else Americans supposedly hate. So the sanctions will never work. The only way Israel will ever fall is if it falls from inside. That means by a process in which, like apartheid, the international refusal to let them be a part of the community caused them to fall, and young Israelis begin to move out in massive numbers to Germany, America, Canada, and Australia, like the Jews of South Africa did. Only then will it fall, or it will fall by its own suicide, as many Jews did at Masada against the Romans. And that means Israel will be given a green light by a crazy little doodle bug in Washington named Donald Trump. Israel will attack Iran, and Israel will be wiped off the face of the planet, but sadly so will many Palestinians. That is the only way Israel will ever collapse. No other way will bring Israel to its knees, unless, of course, Russia blows up America, and then it's on its own.
You know, that paints a pretty abysmal picture for the people of Palestine.
It does. Well, Ramsey, do you see it differently? How do you see it changing? Do you really think it's going to change any other way?
Israel is a country that is built on two juxtaposed realities. One is its strong army that is financed and supported by the United States and other European countries. And of course, the settlements projects and the ethnic cleansing and the war and all that. But the other is the idea of Israel. Israel as a country that stands for something beautiful. Israel is a country that has that gives us hope. Israel is a country that is an expression of a miracle, a country that made the desert bloom, a country that makes us feel good about ourselves. It is that idea that, in my mind, has to be challenged, more importantly than the Israeli army for the time being. And this is what Israelis are worried about. And that's what Netanyahu keeps talking about, the delegitimization of Israel. Because we are going for the heart of that idea. We are saying, no, you invite a sense of despair. You stand for everything wrong with the world. You are a militaristic regime that flourishes at the expense of killing innocent people. And this is why there is this panic. We have, once in a while, you hear about a conference being canceled in Canada, in Spain. There was a conference canceled the other day that basically tries to expose Israel. For this, we are talking about, nerdy professors and academicians like myself just getting together to talk about what Israel is doing. And yet, somehow, you get the Israeli Foreign Ministry involved, Israeli ambassadors involved, the Internal Ministry of Spain involved. Why? Why this sense of panic and fear? Because we are going after the idea itself. We are going after the idea itself. And this is what I think will eventually happen, is that when that idea is duly and fully challenged, Israel will cease to exist in its current form. And it's going to fight. It's going to fight for apartheid. It's going to fight even more aggressively, the same way that the South African apartheid government fought at the very end, the same way that every falling colonial regime in the past fought their hardest towards the end of their existence, because they knew it's now or never. And that's what I think we need to keep stabbing at. The very idea that Israel has managed to really just weasel throughout the years, that it's a country that stands for something beautiful. It's a country of law. It's a country that reflects the hopes and aspirations of humanity. This poetic idea about Israel needs to be demolished. And in my opinion, this is something, at least within the intellectual realm, we can fight very, very hard to achieve, and we can achieve it. And after that, Israel would have to make a choice to continue openly as an apartheid military-based state or not. And if they do, I don't see one single example, again, aside from North Korea, in which that system can be maintained for a long time.
I agree with you, Dr. Baroud. And I think that idea of Israel is going to perish because more people are becoming aware. During the British Mandate, Jewish terrorism was so bad, and that was done through the Haganah, the Irgun, the Stern Gang. And there were daily bombings, murdering Palestinians, other Jews, and of course the British. So right from that, they go into declaring the state of Israel, and they go into the Nakba, where they expelled 750,000 Palestinians, 33 documented massacres, probably many more. And the whole existence of Israel is an affront to civilization. And I think that idea is going to, from 1975, Israel has invaded Lebanon 5 times. They get up and decide, what country am I going to attack today? And once the world really understands what Israel is, I think it will fall.
I couldn't agree. I couldn't agree with you more. But what time scale are we talking? Because people are getting frustrated, and if the Palestinians were to resort back to the violence of old, would that not then just lose them all the momentum that they've already gained and all the sympathy and compassion shown from other areas around the world?
I don't see any sympathy and compassion, frankly.
No.
Not in real terms, but the people on the streets are passionate and compassionate. We might not see...
Keep your compassion. Let me have my freedom.
Yeah, you got a point. So...
I was in London during the Israeli invasion of Lebanon. I think it was in 2006.
Okay.
And there was a call for protest that happened towards the end of the week, and they called for a protest on the weekend. I really expected that there would be kind of a turnout of 100, 200. I'm used to that sort of thing in Seattle. I go the day of the protest, and the entire city was shut down. The number of people who showed up, it registered as one of the highest protests or the most attended protests in the history of the city in a long, long time. We actually, once we reached the Trafalgar Square, we needed to wait for about 2 hours until the tail of the protest got to the area in order for the speakers to speak. I think this is an indication of a changing reality. I think the fact that most Europeans actually see the U.S. and Israel as a greater threat to peace than even Iran and North Korea, I think it's very indicative of a changing reality.
Yes.
The question is, how do we harness this energy? How do we invest in it so we can actually turn it into a real political tool in order for us to demolish that Israeli apartheid monster, the Israeli apartheid wall? And we will. We will. I started this interview or this discussion of ours with, quite a grim comment about how when I first came to this country, I was shocked to see, that Palestinians had to argue for their very own existence. Okay, so we haven't yet got to where we want to be, but we are now much more present in American campuses than ever before. The very idea that a professor would even host a Palestinian speaker in a university in the 70s and 80s would get that person fired. Now we reach a point that they refer to American campuses as Palestinian occupied territories because of the massive support we have among this young generation. Even American Jews, according to Norman Finkelstein and other researchers, even American Jews themselves, the young generation, and Israelis are writing about this actively, by the way, in mainstream media in Israel, Haaretz in particular, how Israel is using the young, the youth, the Jewish youth in the United States. We are talking about a changing world. The old Zionist strategies of the past, the likes of Shimon Peres and Ariel Sharon and Begin and these great Zionist visionaries, warmongering indeed, but great in the sense that they kind of saw a big picture. That generation is gone. You are looking at a generation of Avigdor Lieberman and Bennett and Netanyahu and people who were mostly born in Israel, people who don't see that, people who are inspired by their sheer military power. Again, military power has its own limits. Even the greatest empire on earth right now, the United States, have learned the limits of its military power in Iraq and elsewhere, and they are now not even fighting active wars anymore. They are fighting, leading from behind, as they say. Israel eventually is going to realize the limits of its military power. Israel
I would like to add to that. You know that Israel is concerned because they have their lobbyists in America, from New York and now in Texas, California, passing laws to make it illegal for that state to do business with anybody who supports any action against Israel for its apartheid regime in the BDS program. If you do business and you support BDS, you are forbidden from state. Moreover, a lot of states are making it illegal for anyone to support Palestine on campuses. And while Trump tweeted yesterday about UC Berkeley, maybe we should hold up their federal funding because UC Berkeley protested the Muslim ban. On the other hand, he supports holding up also funding for anyone who criticizes Israel. So he cannot have it both ways. He cannot cut funding. Yeah.
Do you mind if I just jump in there just for a few seconds and we can carry on? Just the idea that the pro-Israel crowd is on the defensive is unprecedented. I mean, when they try to pass these laws, yes, we should be emphasizing that how ridiculous and how outrageous that they are doing so. But on the other hand, I think we should pause and think. For crying out loud, the Israelis are now on the defensive, that they are trying to it's like the boat is leaking. Yes. And there are so many holes, and they are constantly trying to, stop the leak, but the boat is sinking. And I think it's going to continue to sink. And for me, when they do this, it's absolutely outrageous, but I think there is some positive element in that outrage as well.
But what amazes me, Ramsey, and Kervin, you know this, Carol, I know you know it, in England, in Great Britain, there is evidence of Israeli agents and the ambassador from Israel to England, to Great Britain, teaching people how to sabotage the Labour Party conference by accusing people of anti-Semitism. They're trying to pollute the environment of the political parties in England itself and try to change the laws to redefine basic fundamentals that we have accepted as part of humanity and civilization since the end of World War II. And in Canada, they've done this. In America, they're doing this. In Great Britain, they're doing this. Even in France, if you so much as say one word against Israel, you can go to prison. And I don't know where this is going to stop, but I have a question to all of you. How is it that a little country with 5 million or 6 million Jews in Israel, how is it that this little colonial outpost is changing the face of the entire superpowers of the world, and we're not changing its face? How
Zionist control?
Well, that's a canard. I think it goes beyond Zionist control. I think I think Ramsey referred to it a little bit when he said that they have established a brand that Israel made the desert bloom, when quite naturally it was blooming under the Palestinians for thousands of years without all this irrigation and theft of water and pollution of the sea and nuclear weapon wastage. It was blooming quite fine before they brought in 5 million foreigners from Russia and Europe on the back of guilt on Germany. It was blooming beautifully. On the contrary, they've taken a paradise in the Middle East and turned it into a dumping place for refugees who come with a lot of paranoia and hatred and revenge for the indigenous people that is misplaced and should be against the Germans and the Europeans who treated them so badly and my ancestors so badly. So I think Ramsey has got the point. They have branded themselves as the victims, in some way made the West feel guilty to give them special permission to violate the law, far more than Zionist control. I think it is a branding propaganda that instills guilt and reward for those who support it. Am I wrong here, Ramsey?
Well, hang on a second, guys. We've got 4 minutes before the show ends. This 2 hours have actually flown by much quicker than I ever imagined. And I'd just like to give our guests an opportunity to just round up, especially even on just what you've just said, David, and try and finish on something positive for our listeners. A message of hope, possibly, Carol. Carol?
Me? Yes.
Yeah.
A message of hope. Every time I talk to my Palestinian friends in Gaza and the West Bank, I feel hopeful because of their spirit. And, their very existence is an affront to Israel. And they definitely are going to exist, and they're going to be there. So that's hopeful. And I think that this victimization of Israel, that idea, which was always put forth, is falling apart. I think it's falling apart every day. And what really makes me hopeful are the young people that are coming up. And the Jewish young people, the American young people, the young people across Europe, and God bless the young people of Palestine. I think there's a lot of reason for hope.
Amen to that. Ramsey, do you want to just round that up? We've got about a minute and a half.
I think there's plenty of hope, really. And I know sometimes things get really quite hard that we can't see it that way. But there is plenty of hope, for one reason, because of you, David and Kervin and Carol, and millions of like you around the world who put Palestine as in the heart of their moral compass. That's why there is hope, that despite of the propaganda and the hasbara, despite of the intimidation and fear, despite of all of this, you are speaking out and in a very articulate and beautiful way about Palestine. And that's why there is hope. But there's also hope because the Palestinian people really have no plans to go anywhere. I mean, it's a land that they have their ancestors that have inhabited since the Canaans 3,000 years ago, and they continue to live there. Invaders come and go. We stay, and we'll always be there.
Thank you very much. We've got about a minute. We've got about a minute for me and you, David. So very quickly.
I would like to end with Ramsey's statement, "A blessing in disguise," where he says very quickly, "But that era is over. Bad will no longer will be good. Wrong will not be right, and warmongering is not peacemaking. In fact, Trump is set to expose American foreign policy for what it truly is and has been for decades. His presidency is likely to give all parties a stark choice regarding where they stand on peace, justice, and human rights in Israel and Palestine. And I hope that his words come true, and that is my hope of the day."
Thank you very much. Listen, I just want to thank each and every one of you for being part of an absolutely fantastic show. I want to especially thank our producer, Teresa, for putting this show together and introducing us to a fantastic guest in Ramsey. And I just look forward to us all coming together again, where we'll be able to possibly share much better news and a brighter future for the Palestinians who are under this Israeli regime. My name is Kervin Julien. This is Issues Today on World Jam Global Radio, and we're out of here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello.
I do think next week we're back with Tony Sayers and the rescheduled show. And I think the week after that,
I pay for my crime.
It's going to be with Keith